Hello, everybody. My name is Nina. I'm a business analyst / product manager with ThoughtWorks, and this is my colleague Finn. He's a quality analyst with ThoughtWorks. And for roughly the last year, we had the opportunity to work with each other. And during that year, we almost never got into a fight. And given the professionalities that we've chosen, this seems to be a rather rare occasion. So we sat down and we reflected what were the things that enabled the two of us to work in harmony. And these reflections we want to share with you in our talk about business quality of the business value of quality. In order to do that, we're going to tell you the tale of two people. And we're going to start with the product manager. Do we have any product manager in the room? No show of hands, like a slight insecure nodding, maybe, okay. So now I'm free-floating then. I'm the only one here, okay. So the product manager has, of course, a lot of responsibilities. Like they are responsible for making sure that the big picture is provided to the team. They're responsible for making sure that what the team is doing aligns with what the business wants. And they are in charge of the requirements. And not only the requirements, they're only in charge of making sure that they're prioritized in a way so that for the team, it's guaranteed that they're always working on the thing that brings the most value. On a product level, we say we're building the right product just at the right time. But how do they know, like, what's the right product? So for a company, there are many different ways of putting a North Star. And normally there are very different levels to it. So this is just a schematic approach to that. So normally it starts with a vision. A vision is something that's valued for, like, let's say at least 5 years. It's a little bit out of reach, it's a little bit foggy, and it's super ambitious. So when we look, for example, at the vision of Tesla, what they want to do is they want to create an automobile so compelling that for the 21st century, they drive our society towards electric vehicles. If you don't know the vision of your company, look it up. If your company doesn't have one, I'm compelled to say make it up, but this is for a whole other talk. So, and the vision is something that is fuzzy and it's meant to be. It's broken down then and getting really tangible with the strategy. So the strategy has like a shorter focus, let's say for a year. It can be like, what do we want to do in this year? What do we want to achieve? What user group we want to include? What do we want to include in our product portfolio? Like this is really a little bit more short-sighted, but should still be something that helps you with that vision. And while the strategy says, okay, this is what we want to do, and we need to know when we're successful. And this is normally where then there's some kind of goal setting. Like Google is using objective key results, like you can have all kinds of forms of goals, but the goals tells you of what. Like for example, we want to increase the subscription rate for our online magazine by 20% at the end of this quarter. So it tells you the what. It doesn't tell you the how, and this is where we now dive a little bit deeper into the product level. Because now we're going to talk about what do we have to provide in order to achieve that goal that helps us navigate the strategy, which helps us fulfill our vision in a couple of years. So and the initiative is something that can be any other name, what it's like, whatever you probably know what it's like in your company, what it's named. We call it initiative because we look into, okay, in order to increase the subscription rate by 20%, let's have a look of how people actually subscribe at our website and what are their pain points. And then, for example, we realize, okay, we have a lot of people dropping out because apparently when we asked them, they said, we didn't know what we're subscribing for. So let's say one of our initiatives is to increase transparency so that the user knows what they're subscribing for. And then increasing transparency can happen in a lot of different ways. So this is then when we are on an epic and a story level, when we're really talking about features. So in order to increase transparency, we want to provide a navigation bar and a quick summary on the right, because we believe that if we give this to the customer, it helps them to make a decision for us, and hence we believe we will have more subscribers at the end of the quarter. So, and While for the product manager, all of this is reality. For a team, like it's more bottom up, and they're working maybe on different initiatives, maybe on different bets, but hopefully towards one strategy, and everybody hopefully towards the same vision. And here on the very bottom, what we see are the stories, and this is where the daily business of the team takes place. This is where all the team meets and where the product manager is responsible for making sure that these are really prioritized after this brings the most value to the table. This is what we have to ship next. But then in the end, what is value? So business value is a rather informal business term. It's roughly thought of as everything that helps to keep the organization healthy in the long run. And having that said, it's definitely not just money. So there are a lot of different perspectives that you can take on business value, a lot of different angles. For example, you can talk about commercial value. So commercial value is probably the most tangible one. This is shipping something that a customer will pay for. This is, for example, having Amazon coming up with Amazon Prime. People pay $60 a year, have another service, like this whole ecosystem on that. So you have something shipped that somebody pays for. Market value, for example, is entering a new market or making your product interesting for a new user group. So this can, for example, be like WhatsApp doing messaging and then all of a sudden saying we are offering video calls and getting more interesting for other users. Then we have customer value. Customer value is something when you ship something that your customers have been screaming for a very long time. So please Jira, please Microsoft Teams, can we assign 2 people on a story card because we're pairing and we cannot track of who's working on a story. Please ship that. So that's one of those. And then there is something more abstract, for example, future value. This is when you invest into a new technology, for example, that will allow you to ship your product in a way that's not possible now. So for example, you invest into machine learning because you have a lot of data, you're going to create a lot of insights, and this is going to help you shape your product in a way as how your customers is going to like it. So, but nevertheless, I could go on for a long time. Like these all have a similar constraint, and that constraint is called time to market. So let me dig a little bit deeper into the context of time to market. Does anybody in the room know this graph? Okay, a few hands, because this is a very old school marketing graph. So, and I'm going to use this old school marketing graph to explain to something that has been rapidly exploding in the digital space. So what we see here on the x-axis we see time, and on the y-axis we see like money, like cash incoming and cash outgoing. And we see basically the product life cycle of, this is working, there I am. You see the product life cycle. So you have here the team developing, shipping the product, and then at some point you decide that this is good enough and you launch the product. And then it takes a little bit of time for the product to pick up, like it's going like mouth to mouth, and more people buy your product, so you can see that the curve is actually going up. So, and then, especially in those digital markets that are super fast paced with a lot of innovation, right? At some point, nobody's going to use your product anymore. So the demand of your product is going to decline. So then you can see that you're ramping down your product, and then somewhere you're going to bury it. So this is what you see here below the x-axis is cost. These are the development costs. And what you see above here, like everything under that curve, is the money that you make. And at the beginning, you don't know how high will that curve be. So as a product manager, I would always say, let's be quick. Let's try to keep the development costs as little as possible. Let's ship it into market. Let's see if people actually pick it up, right? And once we see that there is a trend, once we see that there is a potential of making a lot of money, then we build it properly. Because what happens when you're late to the market is the following. So you probably have a little bit more development costs. So you enter the market later, which means probably like your competitors are already in the market, or anything else happened in terms of innovation that makes what you've been building a little bit less Interesting. And just because you're late to the market doesn't mean that your product expires like with the same shift as you've been late, because there are a lot of market constraints that you don't have influence on. So what we see here is it dies just around as the same as it would if you enter in the time planned. That means we have probably more cost because we spent longer to develop it, and we lost quite some revenue. So, and as a product manager, I'm responsible to make sure that the costs that we spend on the product are smaller than the price that we earn with the product. And this is why the perspective of the product manager is speed, speed, speed.
So maybe you're familiar with this perspective or challenged by it. So there's our own perspective, the perspective of quality assurance. And if she comes and says, we want to build those new features, we want to do them fast, we don't want to spend development costs, then I say, whoa, wait. Are you sure this will fly at all? I only see bugs here, I see missing requirements. And we will spend all the time only fixing bugs. You don't believe me? Look at that number. This is the amount of money the US economy is spending every year on fixing defects. Do you want to be a large portion of this money? Probably not. So we should better be safe to find all the defects that can be there and to be really thorough in looking at them. So what do I do then? I look how much defects cost. And this is an old graph from NASA. NASA is good in doing science and is good in finding defects mostly. So you see an average cost here and the process basically that you walk through. So when you find a defect very early, when you write your requirements and you think, hey, we shouldn't do it that way because it won't work, we should do it in a different way, you just rewrite it a bit and it costs just a few minutes, maybe an hour to discuss something. So the cost is maybe, I don't know, $100 or something. Then you design your architecture, you develop your functionality, you start testing, and it becomes more and more expensive. If you find a defect there and you have to code something again, it costs 10 times as much as if you find a defect here. And then finally you ship to production and the cost is immense, right? You have maybe loss in revenue, you have a huge context switch if you find the defect just a week or 2 months later, and this is all very expensive. So what quality assurance wants to do when they assure quality, they put a gate right before production, right? This is what we usually do. We try to test as good as possible right before the most expensive step to spare the biggest part of the costs. The only problem that I always feel there is that when we have such a bar and we look at the degree of quality, this bar is only assuring quality. And only assuring quality means that there's just some minimal level that is fulfilled, the level that I defined for those tests. It means there's no regression. In other words, it didn't get worse to last week. Maybe we're also doing, or probably we're also doing some additional exploratory testing. So we are not just making sure there's a minimum of quality in every product that we ship by regression tests. We're also doing exploratory testing, depending on how much time those people give us, right? And then we maybe do a bit better. So the question is, how do we get there? How do we ship a real awesome product, but fast, without impacting speed?
So, and if we stick to our roles, the only thing that we can achieve are compromises, or basically whoever wins the battle. So if I think what you would do, Finn, is when we come up and say we have to ship the following feature, you want to go and have a super solid foundation. So just making sure, learning everything about that, and then we ship very little product and we're going to ship it late. So, which means we're going to be late to the market, we're going to make less money, we're going to not cover our development costs, and hence we're just going to go bankrupt. Thanks, Finn.
So what you're proposing here, let me just be clear on that, is the following, right? You have some very good intention with building a good foundation, but then you just accumulate tech debt and tech debt and tech debt, and you don't test it, and you're not sure what's going there, just to have a high reach with a very little bit of feature scope that you have. This is not sustainable at all, right? So what people try to do then is, in their roles, to find a compromise between these two positions, right? And the compromise looks then something like this. So we still have good intentions about the foundation of our software. We accumulate some of the tech debt, but then it all takes still too long. And the feature is, we start with the full feature scope, but then we run out of time. And this just, the reach is a bit higher, but it's somehow an oddly shape. So this compromise makes no one really happy either.
So what happens then if we all step a little bit out of our role and we have a look at where we overlap, we achieve something magical, and that's collaboration. And especially, and I'm going to say that as a product manager, but I think especially as a QA, it makes sense. It makes sense to have a look at how can I leave my role and actually improve quality. Because if we take back a look at the slide, where you can improve quality, the cheapest is in the requirement phase. And in conclusion, it means as somebody who is the sole responsible for quality on the project, like you want to be much earlier in the development cycle than where you are as a gatekeeper. Like you want to be where requirements are analyzed and drafted.
So what we try to achieve then, when we have the QAs who build like super, or would build super solid but never to market products, and the product managers on the other side just something quick and not sustainable, what we try always is to build something like that. The thinnest product, this smallest scope we can imagine, and there have been so many discussions, not fights, discussions, around how we can shape off scope in order to make the bit that we do testable and sustainable. We always accumulate tech debt, I wouldn't say we don't, but we have a very narrow feature scope that has a high reach then. The benefit is that while others continue building, we are already in the market and we are learning. And the most valuable is we learn what we do not need of the things we thought we would need. So that means a lot of scope is stuff that we actually don't have to build, and that is awesome. So while others finish their product, we are doing the second iteration on the product, and because we have just half of the scope we thought we would need to do, we can actually build it much more sustainable and then reach the market again.
Because in the end, like, we don't want to take a leisure walk in the park. We also don't want to run a sprint with the team and be out of breath after 100 meters. Like, in the end, what we need in order to have a successful product is we want to run a marathon. And running a marathon only works at a sustainable pace. So what can you actually do? Like, what did we do when we were together on that project? So first of all, we had much more FaceTime with each other than we probably hoped for. So we've been pairing a lot. So we want to give you one example of what this pairing situation on analysis of requirements actually looked like. So we had the following scenario. We were building an application. It was a microservice architecture. We were building an application where somewhere in the journey, long before on another page, the user would provide customer data. And then in another part, like totally out of that user journey space, they would go in and try to send a personalized message to a customer, and we would reuse that data that was entered before. And because one of our principles, one of our design principles at the time was being effortless, if they spotted a mistake here, we didn't want them to go all back in the application, change the data, save it there, go back on this page, and then send. We wanted them to be able to edit the data right here. But then we also had to make sure that the data that they corrected, for example, when they wanted to write, "Hi, Lena," instead of "Dear Lena Green," because they knew them better, we wanted to make sure that all of this is consistent the next time they pick that data up. So we actually had to not only show it with us, we also had to put it back into where the original data was stored.
So taking this into a user journey, it looks something like this. This is what Nina just explained. We come from one page, someone later go to the next, and then maybe it hit the last. In terms of architecture, it looked a bit like this. So we had this microservice architecture thingy that meant basically two different servers of two different teams. We were team B in this example, and there was another team A caring about the customer data. So what Nina just explained, data is entered here, then it's synced to the other server, and someone presented in this front end again. Then the data is altered, sent back, and presented yet again. So when I look at this as a QA, thinking about the requirements of this, I can say, okay, something, oh wait, this is the happy path. This is what I think about, that's easy, and that's her job to take care of it. So I think she can do it. I think
Thanks,
of
Finn.
the edge cases, of the wrong scenarios. So something can go wrong right there in the connection when we write back to the backend. Something can, so we have to handle this error on that page. If there's an error writing data back, we have to handle this error for the user so that the user is informed about what is going on, or more specifically what is not going on. Then I may have an error between the communication of the servers or of this data that isn't arriving in the front end. Here in the front end, when the data is not arriving, I don't even know if this connection is broken or this connection is broken. So regardless, I only need one error case to deal with it on those 2 pages. When I then send the data back, it may also go wrong, and I want to present a nice error message to the user there as well. And when the data is finally presented once more, then I think I have to go closer here to the clicking thingy. Then I want to handle this last error case. So when the data isn't going to the front here, I want to handle yet another error case, right? And if you look at it, the first thought is, what the fuck? I mean, who keeps an overview of that, and who is to implement all those error cases? I mean, this is like the scope of this story that sounded so nice, just exploded. So the 2 of us started talking and started looking into this, into each case. So the first one, the communication between the page and the server, that's the other team. I trust them, they can handle it. If they can't handle it, they have a bad QA, but that's their problem. That's nothing that I can do. So we decided to not care about that. The communication between the 2 services, we have a thing called contract tests in place. So we make sure these services are communicating, and we make sure they can understand each other. So the only way that the data is not flowing between them is if they are down. So if they are down, we have an entirely different problem with our entire architecture and problem than error validation in the front end. So we didn't care about this as well. Then when we present data here to the front end, it's basically the same. We didn't care so much as well because people would just see the old data, close the window again, and it's still fine. They wouldn't go back the entire user journey because it's too much effort. It is a convenience feature. So if the convenience is not there, they wouldn't go back all the user journey. So there was nothing there to handle. And again, if we couldn't present the data here after it was changed, the people wouldn't try again because they were basically in a sales pitch. They wanted to be fast and they wanted to make a sale and nail it down. So they wouldn't try again. That meant the only error case we needed was when we were sending data back to the backend. That was the only time that we really needed to make sure to inform the error, to inform the user of the error on the page. And that called out to work on one single bad case scenario instead of all of them. That means the benefit here was to collaborate with your PM in order to help you identify the business relevant sad path, and more importantly, ignore all the other ones, right? Because otherwise you would just account for all the things and fix everything, and this is just a bit too much if you really just want to deliver the happy path feature.
So, and this took us some time, as you can see with the graph, to figure that out and actually define what is the one that's really relevant to the user and relevant to the business. And once we come to a conclusion, what we want to do is we want to collaborate with the team. And the first step is to actually share what we've learned about what we want to build and how we want to build it with them. And we're not talking about like having big planning sessions, right? This is just about, so, hey, we have this journey going on, we're going to work on this feature, we want to share with you quickly what we've learned so far about how we want to do it and what we want to do. Because this will help you to have a team where everyone follows a clear and common goal, rather than to say, like, we're successful if we deliver XYZ story points this week. So what we're achieving by doing this is we're much more focusing on outcome and not just on output. So, and once we gave a little bit of the insights and take a little bit in of the input that the team gives us, we're going to start working on the story. So, and for us, we like a story is always just a token for a conversation. Just because like I sat down and wrote it and I had a feedback conversation with Finn and then we wrote it together, doesn't mean that it contains everything that we need to know in order to have a smooth delivery of the feature. So we start with a kickoff. So probably this is one of those ceremonies that is already out there, and like if you follow Scrum or Kanban or whatsoever, like this is not so much new. This is about gathering together in front of the story, what you've written down, and talk as long as it takes in order to make sure that you have the same understanding and that you also have the input from the developers. So, and when we then started developing on that piece, like we also call it for desk checks, because that's not when we say, okay, so we have the shared understanding here in production. This is when we say, okay, this is what we know now, so let's get started. Let's start with the first bits of the story. And then we're always pingable and we're always available for answering questions and learning about the things that maybe the developers discovered while building it, because that always happens, that they find something in the code that you can either do this way or that way, and it's going to have an impact on the design, it's going to have an impact on the behavior of the feature, and this is just a decision to be taken, and we take them as a team, because it has to come together. Like the quality of what we want to build, the design parts, the business parts, we make this decision together. And that helps us to do the following, because if everybody knows what we're trying to achieve, like everyone feels equally responsible for the quality of the product. It's not just one person. And then in the end, when we have been through the delivery process, like we have a final last look in the sign-off, like with everybody involved, and we see, is this what we want to ship? Does this fit the business goals? Is this good for the user? Is this the quality that we want? And then we either, if we find something, we fix it now, or we fix it never. And this has made for quite some funny conversations between us. So, but I feel you. I mean, we're talking about collaboration, and normally this is when like the red warning blinks go on in a lot of people's heads. Like, oh, this is just a lot more meetings. So, and this is why we don't want to let you go without talking about this. Like, there is a pitfall. If we come up with, okay, we're going to have this ceremony, and we're going to have this meeting and that, and then we're going to have shared context and so on, and it's just going to roll, that's not it. So don't follow a process for the sake of a process. If you're doing the right thing, you will see if the outcome tells you. And I know for a matter of fact that for a lot of developers, nothing feels as good as deleting old code, and I can tell you as a product person, nothing feels as good as deleting a meeting in my calendar that was recurring. Because if you learn that in that meeting, you don't get that out, because meetings mutate, right? At the beginning, you make a lot of sense, and then you learn, and then you keep on that meeting because you have the room booked already, and it's so hard in a company to get a room. So, and yeah, but this is the same. If you spend a lot of time in meetings, and that's the reason why you don't get any work done, then you're probably making meetings wrong. Meetings are work, so don't take them as the enemy. But don't think that everything that we did here happens as a meeting. This is just people in a room and people calling for, I have a question, and then just people gathering around. And then there's that.
Then we're live. Easy peasy. That's all it took, right? No problem. So once we achieve this now, and you think about taking away some inspirations, how to get there maybe, how to become friends with your PM, some advice or some inspiration. How to become friends with your PM. So first of all, find out when and how your PM creates those requirements that we were talking about, right? I can only talk about all these things, I can only ask all these questions if I know where and when. So ask or show how you can support. Don't ask if. Imply that support is needed and just ask, when is the right time now to do it? Finally, we talked about it so many times. What are relevant KPIs for your team in terms of business? When does your business think that your team is successful? Find out about those. Dig somewhere. I don't know where they're stored in your company, in Confluence or in some other wiki, or just people know. But if you know about them and understand how they work, and you're an analyst, you're perfectly minded to figure that out, then you can understand how to be more successful in engaging with the business people because you speak their language. And if I understand what makes her successful, and I come and say, hey, I got so many ways how to make you more successful, what do you think? She won't kick me out of the room right away. And then you can start discussing, are we going fast or are we going at the proper speed? And exactly this balance that we found, you can find as well and have this as a conversation to find the right balance together with your PM. And then very, very important, you care about the impact on testing for all of these things, but don't talk about it. It's your motivation. If I want to engage with Nina, I try to pick her language. So I will talk about the impact on the product. So if I say, we had all of these weird edge cases, and they're so painful to test, and I can't be bothered, and I really don't want to do it, that's maybe less of an argument as if I was saying, you know, there's so many cases, so many things that may go wrong for the users that I've identified. I think we have to account for it in development, and it will slow down our development because we can't ship so many other stories. But I may have found a way out. She's maybe more interested to listen to what I have to say there. In conclusion, so if you wanted now, if you came with a burning question, where exactly is the right level of quality as a business value? If you want us to present one slide, here it comes, with a grain of salt though. Oh. So we have the resources here, always only work at 80% of the resources. If you've been at my earlier talk, we talked a lot about it. And then we have this product life cycle. So you start with some kind of prototype. Maybe you just draw with pen and paper and you walk outside and you try with people. If they like it, you build this first small product. You have your MVP, beta, then a really release, and the next features. And obviously, quality becomes more and more important. If I go out with pen and paper, literally with pen and paper, to try the very first ideas of how an interaction on an app could look like, there is no need for high quality of this pen or this paper. Right? But later, there's more. Take this with a grain of salt. We had a project where it was very, very important to be the very first on market. It was some fancy, one of the first IoT projects many years ago already when this all just was bubbling up. So the idea of the company was to, for all times and the entire human history, be the first one on the market. Then this maybe shifts a bit down. Then you just go out, and if your product doesn't live so very long because it's not the best experience ever, it's okay, because you still achieved your goal or strategy or vision, whatever it was. Then if you were working for NASA and you're sending a space probe to Mars, you maybe don't want to compromise on quality, and you won't say, yeah, it will work, I guess it will work. So then the quality shifts up a bit.
So, if anything, we want to send you home with these 3 takeaways. So the first of them is quality is an enabler. Quality enables you to run a marathon and not a sprint. And I know this is something that probably people of my craft have to understand more than people of your craft. But in the end, this is where basically you have the best of 2 worlds, if you understand to do it right. Second of all, in order to get it right, you need to talk to your product manager. So you want to push left and collaborate with your product manager in the crafting and analysis and requirement phase in order to make sure that you really build that thing that you need at that moment because you understood that business part. And the beautiful part is like everything that you don't build because you probably won't need it is also making resources available and giving people more time and space to build something like that's more valuable. Every time that you don't spend on fixing bugs is time that you can spend on shipping feature. This is kind of a big motivator for a product manager, I would say. But in the end, it's not a process that you can follow. You have to find that balance together as a pair every single day. You cannot say, in this feature, we're going to ship 80% quality, 20% fast, but in the next one, we're going to do 10% quality and 90% fast. This is really down to a daily conversation that you have about the work that is about to go into the team. Because in the end, ultimately, What we want is, we want to build a high quality product and not just a high quality software. So thanks for following us.